Jones on something.
Whoa, we need the breaking news sound effects there.
Absolutely, because I do agree with Jerry Jones. I do agree that they should have gone again on a 4th and 1. You're so early in the season. You're also in a division that's kind of a mess. So you look at that and you go, okay, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is we don't make it. We turn the ball over, they kick a field goal and they win. Guess what? You punted the ball. They kicked a field goal and they won. So the worst case scenario is the same both ways. The problem is you have a team that is struggling, just like we talked about with the Colts last week. It's the same exact answer. If you go out with Ezekiel Elliott or a Dak Prescott, you go in 4th and 1.5, you get that conversion, which I got to believe. Look, in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, what did everybody say to Pete Carroll? How do you not give the ball to Marshawn Lynch on the goal line? It's the same thing. You go with the percentages. You go with the odds. As you pointed out, if I had 2 chances in Ezekiel Elliott, the little Ewok that he is, going for 1 yard, I would take those odds. And you know what? Maybe 5% of the time I'm going to be wrong, but a lot of the times I'm going to be right. I would have gone for it. And so I agree with Jerry Jones. I think it's early enough. You lose the game anyway by not getting it, and you lost the game by giving it to the Texans, then they win. If you convert, though, I think it maybe changes your season because, like you talked about with the Colts last week, it's not a guarantee that just because they convert that 4th down that they continue on down the field and win the game. However, if you do, if that is the ultimate outcome of that decision, I think that pumps up your locker room. It pumps up your team. It sets you in the right direction, headed toward the middle top of these NFC East standings versus where you're at now, which is kind of middle ground, kind of tied 2 and 3, kind of not sure what your season looks like. You've got a team that can't seem to move the ball. Your coach doesn't have confidence in you to get it done when you have 1 yard. All of these messages percolate. I agree with Jones on this one. And yeah, Garrett, if this season doesn't go well, I think he's out.
Yeah, I didn't like the decision to punt either. And last week, it's a different situation. It's hard to compare because the Colts 4th and 5 is a lot different than 4th and 1 or 1.5, especially when you have Zeke Elliott, you have Dak Prescott. They have a lot of options that they could have run. They could have run Zeke. They could have quarterback sneaked it. They could have gotten Dak out on the edge. There was different things. I've heard people say, oh, no, it was the right decision. They should have punted because Dallas's defense was playing so well. Dallas's defense played really well at stopping Houston from punching it in when it was goal to go and forcing field goals. That doesn't help you in overtime if you punt the ball and they drive it down your throat and you get a stop. Oh, we stopped them. They're only at their 20. Well, they're going to kick a field goal to beat you. I feel like people didn't watch that game because Houston felt like between the 20s just moved up and down the field. They just couldn't convert anything from the red zone. This game could have been way out of hand if Houston had had any success in scoring touchdowns instead of field goals. This game wouldn't even have been close. So I think Dallas should have felt lucky they were even in overtime. And frankly, like you said, looking at that division where it's at, they weren't really going to lose a lot of ground, and a win would have been huge for them at this point to just keep pace with this Eagles team because you know Philly eventually is going to get things worked out. And Dallas, what are they going to do at this point to get better? There's not like there's wide receivers that are out there that can help them. So this was an opportunity for them to get a win. They probably should have capitalized on it. So I definitely understand Jerry Jones' position there. So on Monday Night Football, Eric, we saw Drew Brees break the all-time passing yards record previously held by Peyton Manning. But the one thing that we've seen is it's starting to get difficult now because the game has become so pass-centric. Everybody is throwing the football so much at this point that this is a record that seems like it's probably going to get broken again by someone down the road that might not even be a name like a Favre or a Manning or a Brady or a Breeze. It could be a guy like a Matthew Stafford, the rate that he's on and the passing yards that he already has at this point in his career. But right now the record is Drew Brees's. So does this record have the same meaning now going forward as it did, say, 5-10 years ago?
I was looking forward to this question, but we don't have a whole lot of time because this is a very slippery slope, right? This is one of those cumulative math conversations because 72,000 passing yards is 72,000 passing yards, whether it's 1950, 1960, or 2018. It's a cumulative stat. It's all of those yards. Now, I understand what you're saying, that if you throw the ball more often, then your percentage of completing passes and gaining yardage through the air would go up. However, Drew Brees is 39 years old. So it's not like he did this at 32 years old. And now maybe we see, some of these younger guys get up into the 40 and 50,000 passing yards earlier in their careers. However, I don't know that there's a huge threat there because they still have to have the longevity that Peyton Manning and Brett Favre and Drew Brees and Tom Brady have. And again, at 39 years old, and Tom Brady's at 40 or 41 years old, and Brett Favre played a long time, Peyton Manning played a long time, there's still no guarantees that some of those other guys are going to play that long. So yeah, the style of the game has changed, but these are the same conversations we have in the NBA and then in Major League Baseball. And, whether it's the home run ball or whether it's the fact that LeBron James will probably have the all-time scoring record, and that doesn't necessarily make him better than Michael Jordan. It's all of those same slippery slope conversations, in my opinion, because as any sport molds and changes, are Tiger Woods and his 14 majors better than Jack Nicklaus and his 18 majors because of the level of competition that Tiger played throughout his career? It's hard, very, very hard when you start to get into those conversations. And that's why I just say, as long as there's no funny business like the steroid era or the juicing of baseballs or things like that, as long as there's no funny business going on, 72,000 yards is 72,000 yards. It feels like Drew Brees was wearing a Chargers uniform in 1965. I mean, they won the Super Bowl after Katrina, which was over a decade ago. So this guy's been around a long time. I think he deserves the accolades. And I know you're not saying he doesn't, but as we get down that slippery slope and open Pandora's box, just the writers out there and the guys that want to really start to dig in and start to make justifications for why it is or is not as valid as another guy's. Yeah, I don't get off on that too much because I just think it's kind of a road that's hard to go down because it just opens up so many other side conversations that really become more subjective than objective, in my opinion.
I'm not trying to downplay it at all. This is something that's come up more from the media, the talking heads, the talk shows, the debate shows, where they sort of tore Drew Brees down in this record. Oh, it doesn't mean as much, and it's longevity. And like you said, it's still a whole lot of passing yards, and it's still, of all the quarterbacks that have come through the NFL, Drew Brees has currently got the most, and he still looks like he's got quite a few years left in the tank to run this thing out and maybe even put it past 80,000 yards if he continues at the pace that he's on for another 2 or 3 years. So let me ask you this, Eric, because now Drew Brees has the passing record. He's the all-time completion percent leader. He's also the leader in most passing yards per game. So where do you rank Drew Brees sort of all-time? Is he a top 5 guy for you, top 10? Where do you have Brees at?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's another really good question. I'd probably have to study that a little bit more because then you're talking guys that I'd have to do more research on to really start to stack rank. Joe Montana's and Terry Bradshaw's and guys that I don't know their stats off the top of my head type of thing, but I know that they were really historical players. The thing is, though, that Drew Brees still doesn't have that many Super Bowls. And then you go down that path again. Whereas a Tom Brady, who is going to be right there neck and neck with him for passing yards and right there. Actually, what's going to get exciting next is the touchdowns because Tom Brady and Drew Brees are both soon going to pass other guys, the two that are ahead of them in total touchdowns for their career. It's probably not going to happen this year, but if they both play next year, it would happen next year. So you're looking at then two guys that are tops in yards and touchdowns. I'd still have to give it to Tom Brady as the greatest of all time because of his championships. All that being said, though, Drew Brees is not unsuccessful. He's just not playoff successful. And so where does that rank him? You know, Peyton Manning, same thing. Incredibly successful, but not that much in the playoffs. Still one of the best of all time. So, yeah, I think probably when it all shakes out, though, a Drew Brees, he's going to be really close to that top 5, if not like right around 6th or 7th.
And the reason I asked that is obviously the conversation that we've had on here many times, and what sort of drove us to even start this podcast was the whole Jordan versus LeBron thing. And this isn't just for you, because there's guys like the LeBron ass kissers and Shannon Sharp and Nick Wright and people like that constantly make the argument, oh, LeBron should be considered the greatest of all time because statistically this and that, and they go through it. And then you hear them talk this week after Brees sets the mark and they're running him down. And I'm like, how can you talk out of both sides of your mouth where in one hand you make a statistical-based argument to say a player is the greatest of all time? On the next hand, you're going to sit there and say, well, no, this doesn't mean this and this doesn't mean that. That's what frustrates me with the media is that they don't realize from one argument to the next, they don't really make any sense. I don't think Drew Brees is the greatest quarterback of all time, but I think you have to look at his records and give him some respect. But on the same side, I think you have to look at a guy like Tom Brady with 5 Super Bowls, even Montana going 4 for 4 in the Super Bowl, And during their era, they were the cream of the crop. And Brady obviously still doing it today. So it's just a funny argument how the media portrays certain things and certain guys that they want to be their guys. Oh, we got to pump Aaron Rodgers up. We got to pump Tom Brady up, but we're going to drive Drew Brees down when this guy leads nearly every quarterback statistical category from the history of the NFL, from passing yards per game, completion percentage. Like you said, he's 499 touchdowns right now. You have Peyton at 539. So if he plays, it's going to be him and Brady battling it out for that record. That's where I find this argument very funny. Listening to this stuff come on Tuesday was just how many people wanted to just put Drew Brees down and sort of overlook this record and make it more of just the way that the NFL is, when they don't necessarily do that in the NBA, when we're seeing offense like we've never seen before. We've seen a game that's completely changed since what it was in the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000. It's just a really funny side, Eric, when you really see what the media and how they massage and portray these stories and their guy.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point.
All right, so let's get out of segment one on this. Two teams we talked about last week, both were 1-2-1, both got wins. Eric, whose win did you think was bigger, Minnesota being at Philly or the Steelers taking care of the Falcons in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I'll make it short and sweet. It's got to be Pittsburgh, because we know that the NFC division that the Vikings are in is going to be up and down. Sometimes the Lions will win, sometimes the Packers will win, sometimes the Bears will win, sometimes all of those teams won't win. So the Vikings still have really good shot at winning that division, because I think they're just still going to be a lot of beating up on each other. The Steelers, on the other hand, if they had lost that game, they're in big trouble then, because they'd be in last place in that AFC North division with a team, as we talked about in the Browns, that's on the way up, looking up. Not to mention the Bengals, the battle of the 3-1s with the Dolphins. They came up and showed up the Dolphins. They took the win. So the Bengals are clearly not as bad as I thought they would be this year. If that continues and the Bengals win 8 or 9 or even 10 games, you got to figure the Ravens probably for 8 games. Then if the Browns sneak in there with 6 or 7 wins, you certainly don't want to be the Steelers at 1-3-1 going into week 6. So to me, the Steelers winning was huge.
All right, well, that's a wrap here for segment 1. We went all NFL segment 1. Now it's time to go all NBA in segment 2. The NBA season is upon us. It tips off next Tuesday, October the 16th. And we got some questions to answer about the Golden State Warriors. Are the Celtics the biggest threat to Golden State? What do we think about the Rockets and Sixers? And, of course, we have to talk about LeBron and the Lakers. That and more when we discuss the NBA and preview the upcoming 2018-2019 season next in segment 2. We're back, and it's Talkworthy time, and it's time to talk about the upcoming NBA season. It is upon us, and it feels like we never really stopped talking about the NBA outside the last few weeks where we've talked NFL. It felt like we talked NBA all the way up through July and even into early August, trying to figure out what was going on with these teams, free agency, the draft, lots of news coming out, even the late news with Carmelo Anthony. But the season tips off next week, and let's talk about the top, the Golden State Warriors. Boy, the rich get richer. They added DeMarcus Cousins this offseason. They're going to take their time with him and bring him back. There's no reason to rush him in. We know it's championship or bust for this team. So, Eric, again, the rich get richer. Are they the hands-down favorite to repeat again? Is it just that simple for Golden State?
I'm afraid it is, Justin. I've got no disrespect for what the Golden State Warriors have done to build up this team. I know that I've had my growing pains with this over being a LeBron James fan in the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's not going to be any different with him on the Lakers. I still think that's a hard path. He's going to have to battle the Rockets. Other Western teams are going to be in the way even before he gets to the Golden State Warriors. So let's talk Warriors. I think that team is just as good as they were before. I think when Cousins comes back, even if he doesn't play a lot of minutes, maybe he's a 15 to 25 minute type of guy. But I think that's all they need out of DeMarcus Cousins because of the way that they can shift their lineups around. Even with the dynasty that's building here in Golden State and the pain that that's caused me, I got nothing but respect for them. I think that they are a hands-down favorite to win this year, and I just hope it's somewhat exciting, whether it comes out of Boston with the Celtics or, of course, our Sixers in Philadelphia. I just hope there's some challenge there, but they're going to win a whole lot of games.
This is probably the easiest question I'll ever ask you on the show because, yes, on paper, they're the hands down favorite. But we do know that the NBA season, because it's 82 games and because at times